What's up, everyone? Good night. Almost forgot to read tonight once again. Just gonna do 10 minutes, and let's see how this goes. Chatham was a town of farms and small shops built along the Thames River, and the train tracks ran along it. When Pleasant arrived, the city already had a large population of blacks composed of runaway slaves and expatriate freedmen from America. In May 1858, John Brown came to town to meet with the black population for what he called a Provincial Constitutional Convention. More than 40 Chatham residents met in a schoolhouse in secret, away from the gaze of the white residents. They told the townspeople they were meeting to discuss the formation of a new Masonic lodge. The plan backfired as the curious townspeople gathered around the schoolhouse, peering into the windows. They convened just after 10 a.m. Dr. Martin Delaney, a black man with thinning hair, dark skin, and downturned eyes, stood to address the attendees. They were there to discuss a plan to form a new free territory in West Virginia. After Delaney Brown stood to explain his scheme in detail, as he began to speak, he was interrupted by Delaney, who insisted that everyone swear an oath of secrecy before Brown revealed anything. I solemnly affirm that I will not in any way divulge any of the secrets of this convention, except to the persons entitled to know the same, of the pain of forfeiting the respect and protection of this organization. He stated. The attendees repeated the oath after him. Brown told the gathering that he planned to form a militia in West Virginia, liberate several slave plantations, and establish a free territory and military stronghold in the Appalachian Mountains. It would be a place slaves could escape to, a permanently free, multiracial community. He assured his listeners that his plan would be successful because he had been studying insurrectionary warfare, particularly the history of the Haitian Revolution and the military strategy of Toussaint Louverture. Boss, he's a real OG. He planned to establish the territory by staging a slave insurrection in West Virginia after he sacked the U.S. Army in Harpin's Ferry for weapons. He also had a provisional constitution he had written for the new region read aloud. It was voted on and ratified. The men and women presented, hugged, and thumped one another in the back in congratulations. The men and women presented, hugged, and thumped one another on the back in congratulations. The next day, the convention convened again at 6 p.m. for provisional elections for the new territory. John Brown was nominated and confirmed as a commander-in-chief of the new region, and a free man named J.H. Kagi was named Secretary of War. The convention's attendees could not agree on who would be president and argued until 9 the next morning. After a recess, they reconvened, and Brown suggested that they postpone selecting a president. The motion carried. Then they elected members of the Congress from the attendees and adjourned at 2 p.m. Following the meeting, Mary Elaine Pleasant arranged to have one-on-one with John Brown. At the meeting, she gave him a bank draft for $45,000, $1.3 million in today's money. That's wild. I turned the whole amount over to John Brown and his son one night in my room. She later said, they then went over the details of Brown's plan. John Brown and I talked it over, but we did not confide the details to our friends. Pleasant knew many of the slaves on West Virginia plantations. She told Brown she would help spread the word of the planned slave revolt. I told him that by the time he had organized for his fight, I would have the blacks in the state of insurrection and near at hand to come in with a reinforcement, she recalled. With the agreement, we parted. After the convention, Mary Ellen Pleasant and JJ began to put down roots in Canada. After meeting Brown, she traveled to Montreal for an abolitionist convention, where she met up with some of her and her husband's old friends. Wendell Phillips and Geo Green called on me in Montreal, but I did not tell them of my plans with Brown. She recalled, I know there was bloodshed and concluded not to talk it over with them. She wanted to keep Brown's insurrection and her role in it a secret. Pleasant left Canada and traveled to West Virginia, where she went from plantation to plantation, talking with the slaves about Brown's plan for a revolt. They were very much taken with the idea of participating in the fight for freedom, she recalled. The fall after the convention, she and JJ returned to Canada and purchased 4 connected lots of land overlooking the Thames River to build a homestead. She also purchased a silver revolver with a long barrel and joined the Chatham Vigilance Committee and militia with the aim of protecting the black community in Chatham. There were 14 members of the militia. Joining them with the organization of Brown meeting of organizers of the Brown meeting, Martin Delaney and the abolitionist publisher William Howard Day and Mary Ann Shad Carey, all of whom had relocated to Chatham around the same time as the Pleasants. In the fall of 1858, a slave catcher kidnapped a teenage black boy in London, Ontario, a few miles up the track from Chatham. The 40 members of the Vigilance Committee were alerted and met at the train tracks carrying the weapons. When the train arrived, they boarded it and searched for the boy. They found him in the back of the train, seated next to his captor. At gunpoint, they removed him from the train and retreated back into Chatham. That's some OG stuff, man. After the train rescue, Pleasant was invigorated and began writing to John Brown in anticipation of his revolt. The axe is laid at the root of the tree. When the first blow struck, there will be more money and help children. John Brown began his raid the month after the train robbery, to the dismay of his collaborators, whom he had promised he would wait until he was better prepared. He was undersupplied and undermanned, with only 18 men in his militia and a small supply of artillery. In the first hours, they were successful. He and his men captured hostages, including George Washington's great-grandnephew, Louis Washington, and took control of the area surrounding the armory by the early next morning. Brown had hoped that the word of his effort would spread to local slaves who would come to his aid to reinforce their ranks. They, however, were unaware of what was happening. By the afternoon, Brown and his men were surrounded by a local militia and holed up in a barn. A day later, they were captured. Pleasant was devastated when she learned that his plan had been foiled. I was astounded when I heard that he had started in and was beaten and captured, and that the affair upon which I had staked my money and built so much hope was a fiasco, she recalled. Disbelief turned to worry when she realized that she was in danger if it were found out that she had helped Brown. We began to look about for our own safety, for we read in the papers that all of Brown's fellow conspirators were being sought for by the authorities. When they captured him, they found among his papers a letter from me. A year sorry, guys. A year after his field raid, Brown was tried and executed by hanging. I often wished that I went up on that scaffold with him, she lamented. For the time being, she went into hiding and tried to figure out what she would do next. All right, we got 2.5 minutes. I'm just going to read one more page, guys. As she stuck on Brown's raid and execution spread across the country, Captain Charles Church was doubling down on his cotton shipping business. In 1858, or I should read, Chapter 4, Robert Reed Church and the Civil War. As the shock of John Brown's raid and execution spread across the country, Captain Charles Church was doubling down on his cotton shipping business. In 1858, he bought a new steamboat. It was massive at 200 tons and had 2 engines. The interior was furnished with chaises, lounges, and armchairs. It had parlors, dining rooms, kitchens, and dozens of sleeping cabins. The exterior of the boat had a wide deck large enough to accommodate thousands of bales of cotton. Captain Church christened his new boat the Victoria and put her into service on the Mississippi River from St. Louis to New Orleans, with a stopover in Memphis. The captain made Robert Reed Church a steward aboard the new vessel. The rank of steward was the highest possible for a slave. Robert was 19 years old and had spent the last 7 years on the river in the kitchens and dining rooms of Captain Church's boats to earn the promotion. During that time, he and the captain had grown fond of each other. My father gave me anything I wanted, Robert remarked. Though he doesn't openly recognize me, he equivocated. Earlier in the year, Captain Charles's other son, Charles Jr., died at the age of 10, resting the legacy of the church name on Robert, Captain Church's bastard son and slave. In his work aboard the ships, Robert became acquainted with a porter named Blanche K. Bruce, who worked the docks. Like Robert, Bruce was a product of a tryst between a white tryst. That's a really interesting word. I like that word, tryst, between a white slave owner and his female slave. Unlike Robert, his father had freed him and sent him to school. Bruce was stout with light brown skin and short wavy hair. In Bruce, Robert perhaps saw an alternative version of himself. Were he free? The two became fast friends and Robert allowed himself to dream of freedom. As steward, Robert was put in charge of the ship's kitchen and dining room. The role put him on an equal footing with the white merchants. When the ship docked, Robert would accompany Robert, usually accompanied by Captain Church, would meet with grocers, importers, and bakers to buy meat, vegetables, fruit, liquor, bread, and cakes. His work was held to a high standard, as the meals of Captain Church's boats were legendary. The markets were searched for the best the country afforded, and the days on board were marked by one feast after another. Anyway, thanks everyone for joining me tonight. Pieces.